Good morning. It's good to be here this morning on this very rainy, windy Monday morning. There's a lot of water outside right now. Nonetheless, I am inside and I just got through reading Acts chapter 22. And the verse that I'm going to talk about today in today's daily encouragement is verse 14. Verse 14 says, this is Ananias talking to Paul. Ananias says, and he said, the God of our father, this is Ananias talking to Paul, the God of our fathers appointed you, Paul, to know his will, to see the righteous one, and to hear a voice from his mouth, for you will bear witness for him to everyone of what you have seen and heard. And of course, if you know the life of Paul. And Paul in Acts chapter 22 is actually telling his story when he came to know Christ on the road to Damascus, when God suddenly appeared to Paul, and there's a bright light enveloped him. He was blind and he heard the voice of Jesus. Why do you persecute me, Paul? And of course, Paul was a terrible guy in terms of, for Christians anyway. He was one that persecuted Christians, imprisoning them, and even himself saying that he was a part of killing Christians. And yet God showed up and God opened his eyes, and let him see. And I love this because this is really kind of captures the heart, I believe, of Christianity, heart of the gospel. And it's really, I think it's my story as well. But Ananias tells Paul that it's God of our fathers appointed you to know his will. He appointed you to see the righteous one and to hear a voice from his mouth, and you are to be his witnesses. So God had a plan for Paul, and God showed up and radically transformed Paul's thinking. Paul had an encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ that he could not turn back from. It was one that was so real. It was an experience that you could not deny. And Paul went from a guy that persecuted and killed Christians to um, a guy that wrote 13 books in the New Testament, um, proclaimed the gospel all around the world. Amazing what God does. And the reason that I say that I feel like this is my story, and it's true, I wasn't aggressively attacking Christians, but I wasn't pursuing God. When God opened my eyes to see who he was, and I didn't have a Damascus Road experience like Paul did, where all of a sudden there's this bright light and I'm hearing the audible voice of Jesus. That would be pretty cool. I'd probably be a little freaked out, to be honest with you. I'm sure Paul was too. But nonetheless, I remember the time when I was 17 years old and things clicked for me. That light bulb came on and I was radically transformed. My thinking, my desires, everything changed in my life. God allowed me to know his will. He opened my eyes. He allowed me, he appointed me to see him and to hear his voice. Now, I didn't hear an audible voice, but he spoke to me through his word. And it is an experience that I can't go back on. It is so real. If someone were to say, why are you convinced that Jesus Christ is who he says he is? And I can tell them, well, it says it in the word, which is true. And it's something that I can look back and say, you can trust the word. Therefore, it, you could form an argument that way. But the reality is, this has been my experience. God radically transformed my life. When I just remember when the gospel first clicked, and I'm like, what? Christianity is not about just not going to hell. It's about pursuing and following Jesus, who loved me enough to die in my place, and I had nothing to do with it. I mean, everything changed from there. It was certainly my experience. God was in the driver's seat and he opened my eyes, and I am so thankful for that. One of the ways that I encourage people to journal sometime is that as they read, and God speaks to them through His Word. And of course, I highlighted verse 14. Maybe you highlight another verse. But one of the things that you can do in a journal is just write down a prayer, and a short prayer, one that you can pray often throughout the day. And so this morning in my journal, what I wrote was this short prayer: God, thank you for opening my eyes to see you and to know you. Help me to see you today afresh and tell of your goodness to those I interact with today. That is my prayer to God, and perhaps um, that is your prayer to Him as well, that He would help you to see Him afresh and bear witness to His goodness today. God bless.